47. Some tease your attention. The teasing influences your mind to be attracted, enticed, attached, and under the control of the teaser. Okay, so let's see here. Explanation. Dangle a carrot in front of a horse, and you can control him. Dangle to and fro, teasing him. You might say to yourself that maybe a wild, free, roaming horse will not be fooled, and you are right. However, for a horse that has been trained from childhood, he is more easily brought up with certain behaviors. Likewise, from childhood we have been teased by the reality which many others, including the manipulator, have presented to us. You can be controlled when your attention is captured. Another appears to offer you something you want. That could be to your disadvantage. You are under great influence. Those who tease are in a position to direct those who have given up their sense of self-direction. In our modern societies, various communication sources such as television, radio, magazines, newspapers, movies, and other forms of mass media have a tremendous positive influence on people's lives by the display of inspirational, heartfelt, and wondrous stories of fictional and non-fictional characters. These mediums also have a downside. You might say to yourself that a woman displaying herself by the means of various communication sources, acting in a sexual manner, in a teasing way, is not influencing you much. Yes, you are right. It is rather you, by the virtue of your single-minded attention and depth of focus on her, have made her a prominent sense of your reality. Let us explore the ramifications of you allowing her to be the center of your attention. At the time you spend watching or listening to her, you could be doing something else, more productive. Hence, your attachment to her halts your other actions. Your focus on her halts your other thoughts. Your time and effort in focus on her is conditioning your mind to think in a certain way and to react a certain way. When you go into real life, you are somewhat, in fact greatly influenced by your consciousness of her, even though you might not be aware of it. Your interactions with other women might become overly complicated. Overly complicated, because she, the woman, on various communication sources, has presented a reality to you, which might not be part of real life at all. You might find yourself even more confused in relationships with women. The number of hours wasted by various persons who do just the same amount to thousands of millions of hours. People are allowing themselves to be influenced on a massive scale. Going through relationships, you might become disappointed because you did not arrive at the same results which the woman came up with or hinted at in what she was presenting in the various sexual presentations. She, in her interactions with you, presents herself more of a sexual being rather than anything else. Based on this, your view of women in real life becomes affected. With continuous exposure to similar ladies, your view shifts more and more in the direction of viewing women increasingly sexually rather than emotionally, intellectually, and as feeling beings. Your whole outlook on life changes from an emotional, intellectual fulfillment to an outlook of sexual fulfillment, because that aspect is heavily emphasized, and its pleasures are heavily exaggerated. Eventually, your feelings might become dull, and you cannot connect to people emotionally, and you cannot connect to the people intellectually, at least not to the depth of your younger years. You might not even understand the manipulation you have been under. Once you do have some sex and become puzzled as to why the sex did not live up to the joys which they displayed on the manipulator's visual presentations, you might still not understand that they have been visually exaggerating and visually lying to you. To me, exaggerating is the same as lying. Example, you have a car to sell and it runs okay. You tell someone it runs great just to sell it. The person buying it will notice that it does not run great, feels cheated and lied to. Having influenced you, you are more likely to buy products now or sometime in the future that are sex-related. In this way, they get paid. However, by written word, they do not lie. In one instance, I read in the back of one sex presentation, in small print, it said something to the effect that the presentation does not display accurate information about how relationships occur, and that the presentation does not reflect the complexity of real-life relationships. So, somebody's teasing your mind. It's playing with your attention. It's a touch and go thing. It's like the peekaboo effect. You play with kids' minds. Hey, peekaboo, peekaboo, peekaboo. Yeah. The same. Visually, many supposed rappers, they go, and they're dancing. Teasing. Like a woman dances on stage, sexually towards you, as if you could have her. My God. You cannot. It's just a visual presentation. It's a tease. What would be the purpose? What is the purpose? If I advertise, have this sandwich, have this sandwich, have this sandwich. Oh, the sandwich, the sandwich, the sandwich. What's the purpose? So that eventually, hopefully, you will go and try the sandwich. Let me try that sandwich. That sandwich looked real good. Right? They're trying to extract money from you. Okay.
Okay, insight number 48. I'll read it first, then I'll explain it. This is a very important, potent insight. Just as water and air conform to the shape of many things they come into contact with, the way in which your mind operates can be made to conform or be conditioned by outside circumstances. In this way, your thinking and behavior can be altered without your conscious knowledge. So, just as water and air, as you know, water and air, whatever they come in contact with, they shape shift. Such as you put the water in any kind of jar, it takes the shape of the jar. Similar to air. Air, just whatever it comes into contact with, it forms into that shape. Like a balloon or whatever jar you put air into, that's what it will look like. So just as water and air conform, meaning they take the shape of, their form, their shape is based on whatever they come into contact with. Just as water and air conform to the shape of many things they come in contact with, the way in which your mind operates can be made to conform or be conditioned by outside circumstances. So, water and air are very, how do you say it? They're not solid forms. And so they're very malleable. They're very bendable, changeable. It's the way they are. The mind is also similar to this. The mind is not a solid thing. It is, how do you say, full of imagination, and this imagination could take any form. So the mind of people's minds are very changeable. They can be changed and made to think this way, that way, and many. So that's the nature of mind, similar to air and water. So Just as air and water come into contact with an object, it takes the shape of the object. Let's say this is the object and this is air, or this is water. Boom, it takes the shape of that. You know, the same way when the mind comes into contact with an idea, the mind can take the form of the idea. An example of that would be if you go to a theme park, you know, and there's all kinds of rides and different things, and people want to go to these rides. Well, there's lines, and many people conform and they agree that to stand in line to so it's their turn to have fun. They conform. Some people don't. Some people say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go and go ahead of everybody else. In that case, their focus is wanting to get ahead. And that idea of getting ahead of everybody else is what their mind is conformed to, conditioned to. So whatever idea a person is coming into contact with, and this contact is by attention. So whatever the one pays attention to has a potential for the mind to conform to that idea, whatever it may be. And this is vitally important because not only does it have the potential to shape how you behave in a circumstance, also it has a potential to shape how your mind thinks, how it operates, which is vitally important. I mean, that's very similar to brainwashing, because the way you think should be your decision. But if you're not careful, your mind can be conditioned so that it can change the way it thinks, the way it operates, based on outside circumstances, well, by whatever you focus on. So you have to be aware and not allow this, and be conscious of it. So an example, let's see. I give an example here under the explanation of 48, which is at a certain point in my life, I noticed a certain pattern. It was the way my mind was functioning. I noticed that, see, normally before these set of circumstances, which I'm going to mention, this set of circumstance, let's say if I'm walking in the street and I come upon a tree, naturally I would go to the right side of the tree and just pass and continue going, right? So I noticed that after a certain event in my life, I would switch and go the left side of the tree. And this decision-making process was not only for the tree, but anything that I wanted to normally do, my attention would go to the opposite, and I might choose a different decision. I would choose the alternate decision than what I would normally decide. I would choose the opposite, my alternate decision, meaning the weird decision, the strange decision, the one that I would not normally decide. And I realized why this was happening. At that point in my life, there was certain shows on television, which were showing. It was a talk show, and in this talk show, they were showing many strange things, many strange happenings between people. The strangest things, the most oddest things you could think of or not think of. You were just shocked at how strange the people were behaving and what the circumstances, the strange circumstances that were there happening. And so the shock and the vast difference of what was being shown, this show got a lot of following, and people were starting watching it a lot, and I was watching it a lot too. Eventually, what happened was that I realized later is that by watching these shows and watching it a lot, the mind of the viewer becomes conditioned to think of the most oddest thing, because that's what they were showing. The show was that's what the show was focused on. It was presenting relationships between people and odd things that would come up that you would shift your mind and go, what? This was happening? So basically the attention was drawn from the normal thing to the most oddest thing. And by watching the show over and over again, the mind of the viewer, I was one, was conditioned to think of the most oddest thing. For example, a person will come up and you would think, I wonder what's going to happen with him. What has he done? What has she done? What have they done? And what's going to happen? All this stuff. So in my life, whatever I was doing, any decision that could come up, my attention would go to the most oddest decision. My alternate decision would be my oddest decision. Not this, but that. Not only that, but in decision-making processes, but in other areas of life, strange thoughts would come to my mind, oddest things. The oddest things. And that's simply a reflection of, a result of how the mind was conditioned, programmed by the program to think a certain way, to have the attention brought onto the strangest thing, the most unusual thing. Of course, I do mention in the book that there's many talk shows that do good things, and they have things that are helpful for society. Okay. All right. So under Insight 2, the example B. Within example B, there is another example, vitally important also. Similar to example B, vital is example C. So in the middle of example B, there is example C. And this is example C, very important. Kid sees a bright red colored plastic cube. So I'm going to read it and explain. Have you ever seen a kid, let us say of 2 years of age, when the kid sees a bright red colored plastic cube? So there's a plastic cube and bright red, and the kid sees it. Have you ever seen this situation? The mere beauty, meaning the attractiveness of the red object, might build a desire in her, in the child, to want to interact with it. She looks at it. She takes it closer to her eye, often touching the cube to her eye, and then closing her eyes because it bothers her eyes. But she enjoys the contact of getting to know the object. She puts it to her face, to her nose, on her cheeks, indiscriminately. She touches it all over her face, regardless of whether it's her nose or ear or chin. She slaps it on her foot and on her thigh. She might try to insert it into her ear. Or into her mouth. She has more experience with her mouth because of sucking milk. Based on this, she licks it, bites it, and sucks it. She smells it. Based on this, we said that. If she is aware of her smelling capability, that is, she will smell it. She gets the object, throws it, and giggles with enjoyment of this adventure. Throws it. She crawls after it, lays over it, hugs it. She tries to connect it. connect to it, I should say. Hit it or touch it to another object. Oh yeah, connect it to another object. Hit it or touch it to another object. I had to go to all these examples to show you something very important. Hold on, I'll get into it. Basically, the child does whatever that her mind is able to think of. Whatever the mind is able to think of, the mind of the child, whatever she's able to think of, short of hurting herself, but she might hurt herself because of an experience, she will do. She will do whatever comes to her mind. And some of these things are not in the mind. She may just go on and accidentally interact with it in various ways. Our interactions with our partner are exactly the same as the child's interactions with a bright red object. I'm talking about sexual interactions. We often want to interact with our love partner in any and every way that our mind can think of. It's very similar. In a close, intimate manner. It might not even be sexual. For example, you want to be face to face. You rub faces together. You rub your partner's various body parts, such as hands, elbows, forearms, legs, etc., to your face. You might rub any of their anatomy to any of your anatomy. You are trying to connect, to understand the other, to be close, to relate, to communicate, to know, and to get to know the body and or the person. However, in the child's case, the child may be too young to be sexually aware of his or her sexual pleasures. We adults who are aware of sexual pleasures naturally use our sexual organs as a means of connection also. Of course, we might have beliefs that some parts are not to be touching certain other parts because of hygiene and because of culture, respect, and because of countless of other issues. Nonetheless, I hope you see the reasons why we feel that we want to connect in this way. It is because our minds have great capability in mental jugglery of various ideas by analysis, imagination, and creativity. Based on this, we love to interact with our partner in those mentally intriguing, imaginative, and creative ways that our mind has the ability to think of. This is exactly like how the child thinks of interacting with a red plastic colored object. I am not saying that there is no true joy in this. I am not saying that there is no true love in this. There is true joy and there is true love if you choose to experience it in conjunction with the experience of physical connection. I am using this example to show you that we use our mind's capabilities to connect in infinite varied ways. So you have in a sexual situation or an intimate situation where you're interacting with your partner, you may just want to be completely with them, and it doesn't matter what part of your body touches the other person. You're just being with them, and expressing and being free to be close and close with them, genuinely close. I hesitate to use the word intimate because in the Western culture the word intimate has a lot of sexual connotation. So intimacy, both non-sexually and sexually, it involves connection and closeness and shyness, getting away from the shyness and genuinely connecting and feeling comfortable with the other person. And to do so, to connect to the other person, to relate to the person, these are all the same thing. To relate, to connect, involves freely interacting with the person.
Okay, insight number 49. Ending sexual fixation, which affects with intense pleasure, might be more difficult than getting rid of an undeniably unpleasant habit. This is true partly because the ill effects of sexual fixation of slight to medium stages are sometimes invisible, meaning unknown. The ill effects of severe and dangerous sexual fixations, coupled with an uncaring attitude, are well known, such as rape, molestation, and violence. The ill effects of less intense forms of sexual fixation are disruption and severing of relationships with others, Years upon years of wasting one's time and life in pursuit of superficialities instead of in-depth connections. Unhealthy body and mind, postponing or being sidetracked from future aspirations and losing sight of one's true self. The lesser ills have the potential of remaining unnoticeable. Decades might go by before the ill effects of wasted time and wasted life become apparent. So yeah, so we're talking here about the degrees of sexual fixation. So you could have a very low degree, medium degree, and a very high degree. The high degree of sexual fixation, in addition to an uncaring attitude that the person may have, is a dangerous combination. You know, uncaring attitude towards another being, you can take advantage of them in a sexual way. This is very bad. Now, the ill effects of less intense forms of sexual fixation, meaning lesser than the very severe one, lesser than that, is where there is caring, but the person is sexually fixated. There is disruption and severing of relationships with others. This is all sorts of relationships we're talking about, including the regular relationships. So you have, let's say there's a person and they're a person with a partner, right? They're in love and they're getting along and they're planning a future together at whatever stage of the relationship that they are in. They could be married, they could be getting married, they could be in a long-term relationship, they could have a casual relationship, whatever stage of relationship that they're on. The man, even though he's caring and genuinely wants to be with a woman, still has this sexual fixation thing going. And, he's fascinated, obsessed with sex to a degree. And so then he falters. He's going to be impacted by all sorts of stuff. He may be watching various sexual presentations. He may be going to strip clubs and various things. Fantasies may get out of hand when he's interacting with his lady friend. And so the woman now questions, oh, I don't know about this guy. He's showing signs that he's sex crazy in some sorts, and she may break it off. This may cut off the relationship. This is also true of relationships and jobs, meaning like you could have a job and because you have this medium sexual obsession, you might be looking up stuff online while you're on the job. You might have a magazine, you might have videos, you might, whatever it is, you might look at some people wrongly, or it'll come out in some way. It might come out in some way. And then this is going to jeopardize your job. I remember meeting somebody who had a very high-paying job. He said, I was making $3 million a year kind of thing, and I lost the job because I was, I couldn't stop looking at sexual presentations online, at work. I just couldn't, and so they fired me, and he was, I think he was sleeping at his friend's house, or homeless or something similar to that. From 3 million to zero, that's a big thing, and the cause of it, sexual obsessions, Okay. Now, the lesser. So let's say you have, less to medium, very low to medium sexual obsessions, fixations, Your mind is focused on your... Whoa. Okay, so so what is it? The negatives or ill effects of that, which is not known by a lot of people. It's a time that is wasted. It is a time that is wasted on these sexual episodes of self-pleasure, or going to strip clubs, or some kind of sexual activity, or thoughts, or all these things. The time that it takes away from you. It's actually your life. Your life is your time. Time and life they go together. So if you spend 5 minutes of your time doing whatever you're doing, that 5 minutes is 5 minutes of your life. So your time is your life. You see, there's a connection between the two. So what typically happens is that a lot of people, especially when they're young, they see no harm in viewing sexual presentations of all sorts, uh, because they don't see a physical harming of it. They're not doing anything to anybody, and they're just watching this stuff and taking pleasure out of it. So they don't understand what's negative about it. What's the problem, if there is any problem. So the problem is that that time that is spent on these activities of just self pleasure and stuff could have been spent with talking with an actual female and learning about relationships, learning about females, learning about what she thinks about relationships, what men think about relationships, what women think about what men think, and what men think about what women think. Talking and learning about interactions, learning about marriage and what goes on after a wedding, you know, the day after, and the fights that occur between two beings because they're both very complex beings. Think of a being here and like a jigsaw puzzle because of their complexities. They're a jigsaw puzzle. Complex, you know. This person has no match in anywhere, in the entire world. In the entire world. Why? Because this person is an extremely complex jigsaw puzzle. Has no match anywhere. Nobody has any match anywhere. Here's another person. Again, extremely complex being. Think of him as a jigsaw puzzle. Jigsaw puzzle, you know, that with all these nooks and crannies, you know, because why? Because nobody lives the same exact life. And nobody, even all the data from outside that is inputted into you, also the way you take it in and how you think of it, and you know, all these things affect what you actually learn and how you learn from the environment and what you pick up, what you learn about it internally. It's a mix. So you have two complex beings that have the one jigsaw puzzle that is, you know, has all these edges that is different. You try to fit them together, you can't. They're just too complex on so many issues, you can't fit them anywhere. So what happens, you just don't fit. So what happens is that usually when after marriage, these differences come out very clearly because now they're living together and they see that, oh my God, this doesn't match. She likes to put the plates like this. I like to put the plate like this. Why do you have the plates like this? Why don't you dry them like this? Why do you even dry them? Why don't you just hang them here? You know, so many things. Why does she? You know, so many things about so many issues. You know, and this is what causes problems. So also we're talking about relationships too. So people don't know each other really. We're very complex mentally, emotionally, and to learn about each other takes a long time. To learn about relationships is a long time. So all this time that should have been spent talking to male friends, talking to female friends, learning about relationships, learning that so many people in your own family have divorced, and what happened to the house after? Did the woman get it? Was her name on the signature of the house? The deed of the house was the man's. How did they treat each other afterwards? Was the man or the female, or both, or none? Were they amicable? Were they friendly with each other? Were they not? What's going on? What's going on with the alimony? What's going on? Is the alimony too much, too little? Is the man suffering? Is the woman suffering? What's going on? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on, you know. So you need to talk about these things, learn about them in reality, you know. See what's going on, what is really happening with people, what are relationships like. So instead of learning about these things, what happens is that the person doesn't learn, and because they're focused on the illusions presented to him or her, and they're self-satisfying themselves sexually, and that's it. And so this may take a week of the person, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, years, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years. Time goes by. The person is in self-pleasure, hasn't advanced in understanding about relationships. Usually they wake up around 40, 45 years old. Getting this close to 40, they realize what they've actually missed. They don't have an actual relationship. If they are in a relationship, marriage, it's all messed up in so many ways because of the sexual focus. I mean, the guy's married to the woman, let's say, and he's spending time with sexual pleasures online, let's say. Uh, Instead of taking the time to learn about the woman that he's involved with, he's over there, and so this is taking time away from his relationship, and the woman is gonna feel obviously less. She's gonna feel, oh, I'm not pretty enough for this guy. I'm not sexy enough. I'm not. He doesn't like me enough to spend time with me, and he just wants to spend time with these images online. So yeah, so a lot of males, females male may not realize this, but a lot of males bring up the subject of sex because they're so powerfully, strongly, and so many times are influenced by the stuff that they're seeing, or being told about. And so quite naturally he's interested, and so he wants to bring up the subject with the females to discuss it, to learn about it. Of course, obviously, it's possible that he gets out of control as far as the depth of the subject matter. The female, of course, could be wondering, what the heck, why is this guy talking to me about this stuff? What the heck, All right. So my advice is if you find a female or a male that you can talk to about this stuff, about learning about sex, learning about relationships, talk to each other, learn about what is real and what is not real, because you want to distinguish reality from illusion so that you can get away from the illusion. You want to figure out what is positive, what is negative, and get away from the negatives, learning experience. Inside 50. If your primary focus is your mood, you're affected by that mood. Okay, let's see here. So generally, we operate from our moods, and usually the mood of a person is a state of mind, feelings, a state of mind that the person is already in touch with. Those a certain reality that they're in touch with to a degree, that means that they are in that mood. Oh, I'm in that mood. I feel like this. I feel like having an ice cream. What does that mean? You relate to having an ice cream. Your mindset, your state of mind is already established on a particular activity, on a particular way of being, as a state of mind, to a degree. So you have, low, medium to high degrees of the mind being established in that mood. For example, sometimes you're hungry a little bit, sometimes you're hungry a lot, sometimes you just want to eat, you're starving, you're like, I gotta have some food. So this is a mood of hunger, It could be mood of lust, it could be mood of happiness, mood of silliness. It's a state of mind that you're already experiencing to a degree. You can relate to it as if it's very real because you're in touch with it. Your mind is quite aware of it to a degree, from low to medium to high degrees. So, thus you're likely to, because you already relate to it, you usually are inclined to follow that mood, whatever that may be, because it's more real to you. If the mood is low, meaning you're focused on it, but not that much, But so, in other words, the mood is there, so you're aware of that particular reality. Let's say lust. You're aware of it to a degree, but it's low. Now, depending on your focus, if you're focused intensely on that mood, then you're more than likely to continue with that mood and follow along with that. If you shift your focus to something else, so this is a low mood on lust, and you shift your focus to something else, it is likely that you can overcome this mood because you're shifting your focus on something else. And what does that mean? What does that mean? When you shift your focus to something else, you will be soon becoming aware of some other reality, and that reality will be established in your mind. And so another mood will take over. You will be involved in another activity, thought, persons, whatever, but it could be peace, it could be control, mood of control, mood of peace, mood of non-chaos, calmness, surety, confidence, whatever. So your focus is key here. If your primary focus, that's the thing, then you are affected by the mood. Okay, good. If you make your mood your prime focus, that mood governs the mind, right? Because you're making it your prime focus. All right. Okay, we're on chapter 3, entitled Accurate Information on Sex. The information that the mind receives about sex and the sexual organs should be accurate. Obviously, something true, Insight 51. The genitals of the male and the female have many nerve endings, which make them sensitive. In addition, the genitals are used much less than one's arms and legs. Hence, the genitals are even more sensitive because of a lack of use. The sense of pleasure of these genitals are rare. Therefore, it is likened to a rare fruit that one consumes once in a while. This adds to the mind-intoxicating ability of the genital pleasure. So a lot of things are involved in sensual pleasure. And here I'm speaking of it, of three information. One of his is the nerve endings are there's a lot of them, making it sensitive. 1, 2. This is less used. The genitals are less used than the other organs, thus making them again more sensitive. Also, the pleasure is rarely experienced, so therefore the rarity adds to the mind-intoxicating pleasure. Because we said what rarity means. Rare means odd, different, and it therefore has more impact on the mind, because things that are different are impactful to the mind. Okay, number 52, Insight 52. With arousal, the genital becomes extremely hard. Something extremely soft is required to ease it. Again, you see that it is the interplay of the opposites. The principle of the hard and the soft are involved. This creates the dramatic differences, which allows the pleasure to exist, to be felt, which captures the attention of the mind. With the female, the same principle applies, except their corresponding sensitive organ is the clitoris, which is the sensitive part of the genital organ of the female. Insight number 53. The shape of the genital organ of the fetus. In the embryonic stage, whether male or female, starts out the same. The genital organ of the fetus, we're talking about the baby, inside the womb, continues to develop into female genitalia in the interior of the body. And the tip of the clitoris remains accessible to the outside. It is the same genital of the fetus in its embryonic stage that in the presence of male hormones moves to the exterior of the body and continues its development to become the male penis. The size of the complete clitoris inside and the tip on the outside is similar to the size of a penis. Both male and female fetuses have a vaginal opening. However, in the presence of the male hormone, the labia fuse together, closing the opening. The testes develop into male testes and go outside the body. For females, these same testes go within the body, developing into ovaries. Knowing these similarities, one should minimize the persistent idea that male and female are dramatically different. This information helps to ease the curiosity. The curiosity will not be as strong as before. So, here's the here, let me use this. Let's say this is the an example of the genital organ of the fetus, of the baby in the womb. Genital organ. Male and female have the same one. If the child is going to develop into a male, as you know, testosterone comes in, male hormones come in, and because of the presence of these male hormones, what happens to this genital organ, it goes to the outside of the body and grows into the penis. This same genital organ for the female, in the presence of female hormones, continues to develop inside the body. And the size is similar to the males when in the final of it, meaning the end product, both the penis and the clitoris. Penis and the clitoris. The size is very similar. The clitoris, you only see, it's a very long thing, but you only see the tip of it on the outside. The rest is inside, so you do not see. You don't have access to it. So understanding this, then your curiosity eases, because you go, so then you understand. Both females understand more about the males, and males understand about the females, because they understand what each other feels also, and what genitals are like. Very interesting information. I encourage people to look into this scientific information and really get a real understanding of it, and go, this is interesting. Okay, good. Their curiosity eases now because they have information of what it is really. Okay, Insight 54. This is describing a very specific situation here. When you focus on great pleasure, your mind becomes aware of the sensation or reality of pleasure, and at the same time, your mind might lose sight and/or objectivity of other matters in the universe, possibly including your self-identity. With pleasure becoming the primary focus and the goal of your mind might look to other beings as potential pleasure or sexual partners. So I'm going to read the explanation here. Let us take the example of a man who is overwhelmed by sexual data. When great pleasure is experienced or anticipated, in either case, the focus of his mind is greatly on pleasure. His focus is largely on the reality of pleasure, and his focus is less on other realities, such as his other commitments and plans. With pleasure becoming the primary focus of this individual, only pleasure seems prominently real. He will naturally try to arrange to get the most pleasure out of life. This might include fantasies, looking for some of the fantasies to come true, or looking to interact with someone on a sexual level. He wants to experience pleasure in real life, to experience in a more real way what he believes to be at the moment the most real and significant thing. The pleasure. In this manner, the individual has very easily lost sight or forgotten other matters in life. Some of these matters are of tremendous importance. However, since his mind is occupied with the sexual reality, the other matters are not felt as significant, or they are not thought of at all. The situation is exceedingly tragic to such a degree that the person might even have forgotten what he considers to be himself. He neglects his hobbies, his likes, and his very joy in life of being himself. You see many politicians. I mean, this affects everybody, but it's quite in the public eye when politicians fall prey to this, So, they're focused on pleasure, and you find them in the various, even at their job, they're found to be involved somehow sexually with some other persons or situations that are sexual. And, you wonder if they're doing their job, Okay, so, I mean, obviously, when you go to your job, you want to do your job, you go to your place of office to do work for the public, work for the whatever that you're doing, some kind of service. Now, if you can't wait to get home to be involved in sexual activities, it suggests that, maybe sex is overwhelming you. And thus, actually, it is a barrier. Sexual fantasies, sexual whatever, sexuality becomes a barrier to the person's job. He can't do his job effectively. So continuing on insight number 54. Yeah, so we're talking about pleasure. So we're talking about, we are being very specific. We're talking about the focus. If your focus is on pleasure, if you've made that your sole focus is on pleasure, I want to experience pleasure. Now, you've lost sight of all reality. All of life, you're oblivious to it because you're focused on pleasure. You want to experience pleasure. You're not observing life in a real way. You're focused very limitedly on this idea of pleasure. You want to experience it. Why you want to experience it is because obviously you've been seeing these programs, various sexual presentations, or you've been told about that it's presented to you so awesomely. You're like, oh man, I gotta have this pleasure. You don't realize they're being lied to you. Okay, talking about pleasure. So you cannot allow your focus to remain on one small thing, whatever it is. And that is a limited perspective, and you have to understand that. You have to guard your focus. Of course, all this stuff we'll get into later, so there's no reason for me to go into it now. Okay, we're on insight number 55. The mind assigns definitions to people and things. These definitions are derived from the prominent reality that is established in the mind. The prominent reality is established in the mind according to what the mind is focused on. Such as an apple can be defined as a plaything when one is in the mood for play, and the same apple can be defined as food when one is hungry. The prominent reality of the first was fun, and the second was hunger. Now remember, all this stuff has to do with focus. Focus, attention, focus. So, okay, this is a very nice example I'm going to give you. Two small little examples that are not in bold, but they're under the explanation of Insight 55. Let's see. Good, let's see here. Okay, so let's say the prominent reality that is established in the mind is thirst. Right? Let us say that thirst is established as real beyond all other matters. Because he is very thirsty at the moment, after walking in the hot summer sun for hours, and his body is tired and needs water. If he should see a lady with wavy hair, it might remind him of a lady on a beach, and that might remind him of the ocean and all that water. He might be reminded of an island drink with the little umbrellas and the slice of tart fruit to go with it, with the drink. In this example, he did not think of sex when he saw the woman. He thought of something related to water, to address his thirst. See that? So he's in a desert, a man in the desert, caught in the desert for a very long time. Say a week and a half, whatever, 4 days, no water. You see a dang gorgeous lady. You see a gorgeous lady, actual gorgeous. You don't think of sex. You think of water. Anything that is related to her relates to water to you. You just automatically make the connections. Continuing on insight number 55, the explanation. Yeah, so when you see the lady, you in the desert and you're thirsty. Your primary thought is thirst. You wouldn't think of sex. You see her and you're like, oh. You see the sweat on her body, like, I want water. You never think of sex with her. Okay, now I'm going to give you another example here. Another simpler example is that if there are naked women in front of him wanting to have sex, so there are several women in front of you wanting to have sex, each one wanting to have sex right there and there in the most wonderful, beautiful, wonderful way, whatever you want. But he is being bitten by a wild dog. He's being bitten on his bum. I know. You know, you have the sharp teeth of the dog bit into his bum that is tearing at his bottom. He will undoubtedly be focused on getting this wild beast off his bottom because the dog's teeth are very sharp and painful. The teeth in his bottom grab his focus much more than naked and sexually willing women. Therefore, whatever prominent reality is established in the mind, it is that reality that we are governed by. In the example just mentioned, the ladies were no longer defined as sexual objects. They were either defined as having no definition if they could not be of any help in stopping the dog from biting, or they were defined as help to help him get the dog off. Therefore, the definition of people, places, and all of existence changes according to the governing reality in the mind.